Hey guys, welcome back to an exciting week for One Piece. So with the well, it's not even pre-release, the official release of Romance Dawn coming out in the very near future, I have decided to make a little tier list, but it's not going to be me. I have a special guest with me today. His name is Andrew Dovale. This guy is an absolute Chad amongst card gamers, and I'm going to let him explain a little bit about himself if you guys haven't heard of him. Andrew, what should they know about you?
Well, guys, I'm not known for much in One Piece yet, but hopefully in the future. But I am a Dragon Ball Super World Champion of last year, 2021, and this game plays a lot similar to it. So I'm gonna give you my hot takes on the first leader set of One Piece.
I don't even know if there's a hot take to give. I feel like many people have just been looking at the East, and I mean, I'm excited for a lot of the innovations we might come up with in our format, but it almost feels a little cut and dry with just how many powerful cards certain leaders have as opposed to others. So with that being said, let's get right to the tier list. I'm going to start off with the structure decks for each color, and then we'll move along to the new additions that come out in Romance Dawn. So Monkey D. Luffy is the red starter, one of my favorite starter decks, but why did he not perform?
Just lack of cards. You didn't have all of the tools. You get a lot of different toolbox like searching options, like Nami. A lot of different things that you get removal. It gets improved. The red Zoro with Rush, just a lot more efficient coming into the first set.
I think the words are vanillas. We have the deck is just full of too many vanillas, and I think now with
Exactly.
Romance Dawn coming out, it gets just such an insane boost in my opinion. You get more consistent cards in terms of the event. The Mimi at the Archipelago, you have the Nami, you have the Rush Zoro, you have the Luffy, the 2-drop Luffy, which is absolutely insane. You just get to remove all these cards that weren't really doing much, slowing you down, and you get to play actual cards that have effects. And I believe Luffy is in a good spot to take it or to be quite a contender for a good deck in Romance Dawn. So in my opinion, although in the structure deck format he did not perform, I'm going to classify this guy in the A tier.
Agree.
Agree. I think red in general just has access to a lot of great cards, a lot of great removal, and I'm just excited to see how he does. I'm gonna start him off with A. He's not S tier category, but he's definitely A. So then Zoro. How do you feel about Zoro, Andrew?
I think he's a slight bit better than Luffy. His effect gives you more options in terms of deck building construction. I think he can utilize, for example, the red Uda a lot better, which is a nice recursion.
That
So he can
card is
play a nice
insane.
long, yeah, he can play a nice longer mid-ranging game. Playing a lot of the same cards that Red Luffy will, but just being able to extend his board wider, and instead of hitting harder, hit somewhere like 6 or 7K on each thing, which is more efficient usually instead of one big hit. So
Yeah,
I
I
think that's
think
the strength.
I think what we were talking about earlier is the fact that this Luffy, I mean, the starter deck Luffy excels at hitting you for like sevens, eights pretty easily. Whereas Zoro will make sure that he'll be hitting you with like two or three dudes at like 555, which as you were saying is just more efficient. It causes reaction. Like your blocks don't feel as if you get blocked, it doesn't feel as bad because you don't have to commit as much. And at the same time, they either have to deal with their hand or take life, which is that's the efficiency we're talking about. For one Dawn, you get to basically soup up your board. Where Luffy, he kind of gets like a double dip effect on his Dawn for efficiency. But then again, the Nami from the structure that kind of lets you do that in Zoro anyways. So, where do you think Zoro goes?
I'll also place him in A tier, but above Luffy, so ahead of Luffy. If we're gonna rank the tier accordingly,
White. There we
would
go.
be, yeah, exactly like
Yeah,
that.
no, I think I'd agree with you. Definitely in the same tier. I wouldn't say he's S, but he's definitely a little bit better than the structure deck Luffy. At this point in time, you never know in the future with more cards released. But certainly, I think his game plan will succeed just a little bit more. And honestly, he looks pretty cool. He's a cool dude.
Yeah.
So Law. I feel like Law is one of the boogeymen of this set. How do you feel about Law?
I would definitely have him in S tier, personally. I think he is the best user of the red cards because he gets to mix them with very strong green options, kind of making a fluid strategy and a very unique leader effect that kind of positions him in kind of like a realm of his own in terms of deck building. Most of the other decks just stick to the good cards in their archetype, whereas he tries to build specific like cores around his leader effect,
Hmm.
and it kind of gives you I don't know, it just comes out to being really strong basically at the end of it.
A
It's
more
just really, really
well-rounded
strong.
deck at the end of the day.
Yeah, just
So
becomes strong.
I just want to do like a little like segment where I talk about the dual color leaders. So being a dual color leader is fantastic, right? You get to double dip into multiple colors. You get the best of both worlds. You get the best of one color and the best of the other. You get to put, in a limited format where we only have one set and structure decks, there aren't many really, really good cards, right? You have a bunch of good cards, and then you have cards you kind of have to fill up the rest of the deck slots. These dual color cards, these dual color leaders can kind of have more pick and choose and just play the best of each color. With that being said, you have the trade-off of being at 4 life, which in a game where we don't have much removal, much blocking, and no crazy draw, it's quite a hefty uh, downside. So how do you feel about that in terms of Law? Do you think Law's ability, his color combination, just outweighs that drawback?
I do think he can take over the game very quickly if he's given enough space and enough time to do that. He'll start to really, as I like to call it, churn. He starts to like really, okay, bounce
It's a
this, play
value
this.
machine, man.
Exactly. He starts to get a lot of value. So I think he can outweigh it very quickly. Because hitting, you don't want to actually attack him too much early, depending on your strategy, because then you give him all the pieces of the puzzle that he needs.
Exactly.
So it's kind of, he's probably the best multicolor leader that we have for sure coming out of this set,
Hmm.
for that reason, because he really wants to see cards. So he's like, oh yeah, please hit me. So his life isn't as big of a downside as it is for the other leaders.
It's more of just a draw mechanic, if anything.
Where you have to be a lot more cautious with taking life with the other leaders.
Of course. So one thing that's cool about Law, and I think I'm just gonna say one last thing about him. I think what's most important is that you were talking about cores, and we have the Straw Hat Crew is a very strong core. You have the Supernovas, and you have the Wano cards. There's like these 3 specific archetypes that have come out in Romance Dawn with searchers, event cards, and like all this combo that comes within those specific cores. Law, you can focus heavy on Straw and Supernova. You can heavy on well, you're gonna have to use Straw Hat. We don't really have much on the red side, but you can go Straw Hat Supernova, Straw Hat Wano. You can even try to fit in all 3. You get to play the best 8 drop in the game. You get to play the best 3 drop, the best 5 drop. Like it just has the best removal. I don't want to get too into it and hype it up so heavily that it just falls flat. But I expect this deck to be very, very good and show a lot of personality. When you have dual colors, you really get to kind of, if you like this card and there's nothing else besides like, other people might not like it in the meta, but it's good for you and you enjoy what it does, you can put it into your deck because it gives you that opportunity. I'm just excited to play around with Law and see the skill expression showed with that deck. But on that same token, I feel like the control decks, the purple, the blue, they have some really good options to take care of it. So if you're not careful, even though you're a value machine, you could get definitely out-tempoed. So Luffy, moving on to the Luffy, how do you feel about the... It wasn't a structure deck, it was a demo deck. The demo deck Luffy.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty bad leader, at least at this current point in the game. You just don't have enough options to utilize his effect that makes sense. The best one is the 5 drop that can't be blocked, but yeah, it's just not good enough where it currently stands. If there was a more a stronger on attack effect, I think that's what he's looking for. He's probably gonna need a card that says on attack, not once per turn, just on attack, do something very powerful like remove or draw cards or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that way he can turn his leader effect into not only another a swing, but another source of resource generation or
Just of value, something. Yeah,
exactly.
like
Yeah.
for those of you guys that don't know, didn't get the demo deck or haven't seen this leader because it's really not talked about too much. His effect is activate main once per turn, tap 4 Dawn, and then you can set up to one of your Supernovas or Straw Hat characters of a cost less than 5 to active and give it 1k more power for this turn. So what Andrew was trying to get at, there's really no target besides the unblockable 5-drop Rush Luffy that you kind of want to use to give it that restand ability. You know what I mean? And even then, that's just so much like Dawn to use. You're playing 5 for the Rush, then 4, you only have 1 more active. That's a full 10 mana turn where you're not necessarily getting too much out of it. You're not really getting a crazy advantage. But you might get blown out like in the late game. You're not expecting 2 rushers at 6k, and maybe it kind of wins you a game. But with that
I
same
think
statement,
probably the strongest thing he can do that might catch you off guard is like play Zoro for 3, attach 3, attack you for 5, attack you for attack you for 8, attack you for 9.
mm-hmm.
So that's like an interest. Like if you don't have any blockers out, that
And
could
then
be a catch.
obviously attack with the leader as well. So you're getting like eight
And then
nine. You're
attack
getting
with the
five
leader.
eight nine right on the same
Yeah,
turn.
yeah.
So that is something that could really catch you off guard. And that's the only way that I can see this deck really getting that value out. You know, it does have the pro that it is green and red, same as the law. Has the ability to play all these fantastic green and red cards. But maybe the specific ratios that you want might be a little different as you're looking for a very specific game plan to kind of finish off the game in like 2 hits, 3 hits in the final stages.
Yep.
So,
I would
what
put
where
him
would
in
you
D
put him? I think,
tier.
unfortunately, with all that hype, I think he has to be possibly one of the worst leaders in the OG set.
He and another one live in that tier from the
Yeah,
set. Yeah,
unfortunately.
pretty bad.
Yeah. And then let's talk about Crocodile. I mean, not Crocodile, Kid. Eustace Captain Kid, man. This guy, structure deck, didn't do too hot in the limited format. Did fantastic in singles, but where do we see him now that Romance Dawn becomes available?
I have Kid as my #1 deck. I think he is the strongest standalone leader in terms of what he can do. Green has a lot of really good cards coming out in the first set that kind of skyrocket its power. Not it was already a very strong limited battle format, just being held back a little bit by Blue's tempo,
Hmm.
but that doesn't really happen the same. They get the 8-drop Kid. It's basically the how do I say the kingpin of the format. The format revolves around that card and whether or not you can deal with it. Because if you can't, then green will just always win, and that just puts it at the level of just the king of the format,
So
basically.
I
Not
think what Andrew,
unbeatable, but it's definitely the king.
yeah, I think what Andrew's trying to get at is that your deck kind of has a baseline, and the 8-drop Kid is that baseline. Can your deck deal with this card? If not, oof. I think that's what we're trying to get at. That he's like the measuring stick. You have to be able to be ready to deal with that card because it's just so powerful. An 8-drop that you're forced to attack is just a little too difficult for some color combinations to deal with, and that's why Andrew has him as his #1. I don't know if I would say he's the #1. The S tier is very difficult for me to decide who's 1, 2, and 3. I think it's very close in my opinion, but I can see it being 1, 2. We'll see as we finish off the tier list, but we'll keep with Andrew's ideas as he is a world champion on what on what he thinks. But I have a little maybe I don't even know like how to explain the difference in power level, but it just feels very close to me at least. And moving on to the other green leader from the set, or the only other green leader, we have Odin. Oh boy. So Kazuki Odin, for those of you that don't know, just to let you all know, activate main once per turn. You may trash one Wano country type card from your hand, set up to 2 of your Dawn as active. Very powerful effect. Why, having not seen him in the East?
I just don't think there's a good enough payoff yet. Trashing a card from your hand needs to, result in some, at least more than the card, right? At
Yeah,
least more
just
than the
like
card.
Eustace Captain Kid.
Exactly. So you could say, okay, I don't want to take a hit from something. I'll untap 2 Dawn, attach 2 Dawn to my leader, and attack into it, and then I don't have to pitch a card when that card attacks me. So as a form of like removal, or as a way to put more things on board. But I just don't think there's great payoffs yet. I do think that effect will be more powerful in the future once there are better, just a stronger Wano archetype. He has a lot of combo pieces, so I could see him really popping off maybe 3, 4 sets down the line. Where like, oh, this guy works with this, and there's these green cards that
I
draw
mean,
cards. And
just like you said, there's fantastic green cards in the set. You got Paradise Waterfall. You can be my samurai. Not to, he can still play a bunch of other of the green cards. They're not really archetype specific, so you still have access to these fantastic cards and a lot of draw power within the green engine. So as I agree with you, I think as in the future, as more Wano Country type cards come out, if they continue this trend of drawing cards and like getting this advantage cycle going, I feel like Odin was going to become very, very powerful. There's honestly another Odin that has been, not an Odin, I think it's either an Odin or a Kinemon that's been shown for OP2 that I'm very excited to see how he may influence this specific card. But for OP1, how do you feel about this gentleman?
if we're ranking in terms of playability, you could put him in the C tier because you would never pick him over Kid, in my opinion. If you're putting it in just in terms of actual strength, he is still just a mono green leader, so he would be like
Still
bottom of A
very,
tier.
Yeah, he'll still
He
be,
would
just
just
because he's mono green, he's still going to be
yeah,
very solid.
he would still be like bottom of A tier.
But
Like I
but
don't
like
even
you
think
said, why would you pick this over Law? Why would you pick it over Eustace?
you would
Or, you
never.
know, over
Yeah.
Kid? It's just there's no payoff right now. So that's why,
In terms of
unfortunately, as much as we hype
playability,
these guys up, it's
yeah.
just their counterparts are so much better that it's just like, truly, do we really play them? Is it even worth like creating a B and C as their counterparts are just so much better? So just for the
I
sakes of
agree.
putting a tier list, I'm gonna put him at C right now. As more cards get released, this gentleman might start creeping up on the tier list, but for right now, I feel like he's still a solid C. And as you were saying, just because he's a mono green leader, he's probably still in the B category, but I'll put him in the C for now.
No, I think he would actually be bottom of A. I think green is that
Oh,
strong.
bottom A. Oh, you think green is that strong?
Yeah, I think just having access to the color green, you could even make an argument you can put Luffy higher. But in terms of playability, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I
He's
guess
a 5 of
because of that, you can just be like, eh.
yeah, sure, exactly. But you know, you keep them down there because they're never gonna
Exactly, because
see
they're
is
just
good enough.
outshined by over here.
Yeah.
So with that same sentence, Crocodile, one of the strongest decks in the limited format. What do you think happens to this guy in OP1? I feel like, and as an enjoyer of blue, and I have been really blue pilled by Duvall over like the limited format. I really enjoyed Crocodile. I don't think he really keeps his crown. I think he loses a lot of power and a lot of steam. Blue kind of takes a nice little step back in OP1. But how do you feel about Crocodile?
So I'll talk at blue as in general because I think this will cover both points because we're talking about the Flamingo coming up next, which is my favorite leader, and I'll speak about that. I think blue just has one problem in the format, and that is dealing with the 8-drop kid. That is the only thing that I think holds them back. I think Doflamingo is still pound for pound the strongest tempo card, which this game
Pound
is
for
a lot about
pound.
tempo. Yeah, strongest tempo card. It just can't beat the 8-drop kid. So I think for that reason, you have to knock them down just a peg. So I would normally have this guy at A tier, right? But I think because the kingpin of the format is green, we have to put him here. And I think his effect, everybody knows what he does at this point. It's tempo, it's pretty good. You can't really use it until later in the game, but he's still a blue leader. If it draws its curve, if it draws, he's great with the Centimaro engine. He gets a whole Baroque Works thing as well. They have even more value with his extra cards and stuff. So he gets even stronger for sure. He just doesn't have the tools
To
to
get
really
over
get to him.
that 8-drop, and that's what we were getting at. If your deck doesn't measure up to that card, like look what happened. Like I'm talking about, blue was on in limited format S tier, a fantastic deck. They get even better cards in OP1. The more you read the cards in OP1, you're like, dang, these are good cards. And then you're like, man, I can't out this kid. Now all of a sudden, from an S tier, I go down to B, just because I can't deal with this. Because if I ever in tourney just run into Eustace Captain Kid, I'm gonna have a very difficult matchup. And although it is still winnable, my outs are very limited, and it becomes very much an uphill battle for blue. So I think you did a good job at covering both Flamingo and Crocodile with that. But how do you feel about if Crocodile's a B, where do you feel Flamingo is?
I think Flamingo is an A, and I think I put him over the red decks. I
Really?
did. Yeah, I don't think that the red decks are even particularly good enough to compete with green either. I think they have a chance, but then they lose to everything else. So it depends on what people play. But I think Flamingo can actually win. Of the blue decks, he's the only one that can win the green matchup. It does require you to hit a very specific curve involving multiple 9-drops. And I mean multiple.
And I mean
Really
actually Mihawk.
multiple. Yeah. If you're able to get to Mihawk and you're able to defend him, you can actually push through kids. So you have to do that by being at a high life total, which he does well because he forces you to attack his.
He forces a lot of early game tempo. He is
Correct.
so tempo oriented. It's insane. The amount of like board presence that this deck has. Obviously, like there are hands where you won't be able to do it, but the hands that the Doflamingo can produce and the way that it just gives you extra knowledge from your deck. If you play the Pacifista engine, you get access to your life knowledge. You get access to your top of your deck knowledge. You're literally playing with full knowledge of what's going on in your deck, which is fantastic. Something that blue has
Yeah.
over the other decks. Not only do you have excellent blockers, you have pound for pound the best tempo card in the game, and then Mihawk is nothing to be laughed at. That card is amazing, a powerhouse 9-drop that kind of just has some of the best removal in the game. But unfortunately, like you said, you have to have such a specific curve to
Yeah.
potentially push through those kids, because like it's not just pushing through one kid, it's pushing through a kid and blockers, or two kids, and it's just it's so tough, man.
It's definitely a hard race to win. But just as a side note, and then we can go on. It's basically him and Law, in my opinion, have the strongest leader effects of this format. I think Kid is like getting there, and then there's like the Kaido, but for the most part, those are the two strongest effects in this format, in my opinion.
I feel
Um,
comfortable saying that these three have the best leader effect in the set. You have the
yeah.
restand double hit, you have the value generation from Law, and then you have the value generation summoning from Flamingo. So they're just a cut above the rest in terms of efficiency and value, as they kind of give you a board state or they give you aggression from hand. You can think of this guy as like a rusher, which is like really bizarre. You
Mhm.
just always have a bonus rusher on board that can just hit you for a ton. And it's just absolutely insane.
I
Um,
expect these leaders to see a lot of play going
in the
forward.
future, yeah, they're just
In the
so
future.
good. So,
Yeah.
so good. So, like you said, let's just move on. I don't know if I put him. Oh, I guess we never finished where you put him. You put him at the top of A tier. I still feel
Yes.
like he may.
I think he has a very solid matchup into purple. I think he has a very solid matchup into red. And then
I will
I
give
think he has a
you
very solid matchup into law specifically.
I
On
will give
top
you
of
the
that,
fact that he does have a good matchup into Law and a good matchup into Purple potentially, but it's like the purple matchup seems maybe 50-50, and the red matchup into the right red curve, I don't know, man. So it's like a lot. It's a little iffy. It's not like a very wide like good matchup, like as you would say like maybe in limited format, Crocodile versus Kid. It was a very like out there percentages of winning if you were the Crocodile player. Or the Flamingo, I feel like
you
it's a
could
little bit
maybe put him
closer.
between Zoro and Luffy.
That's where I'm feeling it. He feels kind of like
Yeah.
he's not the top of A, but he's definitely an A for me. What an amazing
Yeah.
leader, amazing card. Um, so then moving on to our first dual color blue purple, we got blue purple Kaido. There are two Kaidos in this set, my guys, and this guy's really cool. He has a fantastic effect. For those of you that don't know, once per turn, if you have a Dawn under this Kaido, when your opponent's character is knocked out, you may add a Dawn from your Dawn deck to your area and set it as active. That to me is self ramp, and we know exactly how good Onigashima is in purple. This guy kind of just does it for by himself at the cost of one life. What does that mean?
It means he's not good enough. Yeah, unfortunately, his leader effect is not super consistent, I want to say. It is okay. Don't get me wrong. It is definitely good. But he doesn't get it off on the early turns if your opponent plays around it, which is when you need the ramp the most.
Exactly.
So then you could play Onigashima as well as his effect and so on and so forth. But then at that point, if you're not getting that early ramp, the late ramp is okay, but not amazing. What he really gets access to that it makes him interesting is the blue card pool.
Yes.
More 2K counters, Love Love Beam, etc. Doflamingo, a lot of great blue cards that
Mm-hmm,
separate
mm-hmm.
him, give him some more tempo that Kaido does not have access to.
Correct.
But the problem becomes against all the matchups that you really care about,
Does it matter?
your life. Yeah, your
Yeah,
life is the
exactly.
biggest thing. Your
Exactly. Do
life,
those things
having that
matter?
extra life
Not
is huge.
really.
You're such a
So,
late game deck that you
hmm
need that life. You absolutely need that
and
fifth
that's
life.
what's so kind of like difficult to note about this Kaido is the fact that you're like, okay, purple. It's a late game monster, right? What does it want to do? It wants to self ramp itself. Oh my god, my leader does that, so it must be good. And then you're just like, well, at the cost of that one life, you just kind of get aggroed out sometimes. How many games does purple win and it has 0 life? I'd say quite a bit. Those games that purple now wins with 0 life are a little bit less easy to achieve because you have one less life to work with, which is actually one less draw that you get as well, which is kind of important. I don't know how much that is going to matter in terms of like gameplay ability for the 4 health leaders, but yeah, I don't think it just
And
outvalues.
he's especially bad into the other Kaido.
Oh boy,
Especially bad.
yeah. Not only
'Cause 'cause he's
that
trying to
that
play a
effect
late
will
game.
never go off. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That effect will
yeah, no,
never
he's
go
trying to
off.
play a late game and he's lost 2 life basically.
Yeah, he's because you're just lost, to their what you're trying to get as you're basically saying because of this hero power, you've lost a life, you've already lost a life, so you're basically
Yep.
starting at 3, and it's 3 to 5 is big tough, man. This matchup must be very difficult, and as you were saying, the ramp on this is very inconsistent, and Kaido can just not doesn't play early aggression, so you barely ever plays into this. They can play much slower and just not care. So with that said, where do you see this gentleman? I feel like he follows right here.
Yeah,
Maybe,
I like him.
probably below Kinemon, actually, funnily enough. Or, sorry,
Yes.
Odin.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
he's in C tier. If this is in terms of playability, I definitely think he's in C tier.
Once again, maybe in the future, if we may revisit this card as we get much, much more blue and purple support. The fact that it is a, what is this? An Animal Kingdom pirate. He is a 4 Emperors as they continue to maybe give support for those specific archetypes. And blue and purple are just monsters in and of themselves. You never know where this guy can go into the future. But as of right now, our speculations is that this is just not good enough. So we'll put him at the C tier. And with that same sentence, I guess, how do you feel about this crocodile? I guess for those of you that don't, let me explain his effect real quick. If he has a Dawn under him, after you activate an event, you may draw a card if you have 4 less cards in your hands, kind of like a Level of Beam effect. And if you haven't drawn a card using this leader's effect this turn, so basically once per turn on either player's turn, if you activate an event and you have less than 4 cards in hand, draw a card. So you're always Level of Beaming, and you're playing very aggressively and defensively with your events. What does that mean?
This is my pet deck. I'm waiting for when this one gets good enough. Unfortunately, some of the removal that he needs is locked to Animal Pirates leaders, and I think that's the only thing that holds him back. He is by far the strongest defensive leader in this set. He is nigh unkillable for some decks. I actually think he's very much at the top of B tier. I would wager even like A if you really know how to play him and build the deck. Because he has really this is the best Baroque Works leader, like in terms of the engine. It's just perfect for him because it revolves around a lot of extra cards, and those recycling and drawing, because he has a card that recycles his extra cards, and then drawing off of each one, he can go through his whole deck just defending, counter, like. On his turn, he's drawing a card with the top 5 search.
On your turn, he's drawing a card. If he's level up beaming, he's drawing 2 cards. He's just popping off with the draw power. And there's also cards in this set, the Crocodile 7-drop, that reduce the cost of your events to like cheaper. And it's just the value engine that this deck can have is fantastic. Now, as you were saying, it is your pet deck. I'm also very excited to try this Crocodile. This is one of the leader that, although his effect is like not as we can say as broken as Flamingo and Law and Kid was, like, which is immediately you read these cards and you're like, wow, they're insane. This was kind of like, wow, this is interesting, and I kind of want to see what I can do, especially with these 2 specific colors. So I agree with you. I love this card. I don't think I feel confident enough to put him in A tier. I think I'm going to put him at really high B tier, really, really high. And the more you learn this deck, the more that you get practice and reps in with this deck, this is a deck that I think will reward the player very heavily. So you can start seeing this go from B to A, and more skilled players, you never know how far they can pilot this deck, in my opinion at least. So with that, we're down to our last color, with our purple. So structure deck Kaido, big bungus control, man. We summon big boys and we turn sideways. How do you feel about structure deck Kaido into this format?
He gets access to a really nice card, which is the board wipe, and that is good enough to put him into the S tier. Doesn't get much. Oh, and he gets 2K counters. Basically, that's the deck. Everything from the structure deck, that new card.
You just add 2. You just remove vanillas, add 2K counters, add a bunch of blockers, and add dark hole to your deck. Yep, sounds good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That puts him good enough to just be in the S tier because he can deal with a lot of. You can deal with anything basically. I still think he's the bottom of S tier. He can take an event, but it's not. You have to run very hot with him.
I think I have seen many board states. I mean, this deck has, like you were saying, it has a lot of outs, right? You have the kings, and the new king is specifically designed to destroy Law. Like that card is insane versus the Law matchup. If you see it versus Law, God bless. Like, you probably just auto one. If you follow it up into, like, if you draw into the 10-drop Kaido, I don't feel like there's much ways that this deck can actually outvalue unless they just start summoning rushers. So this matchup is kind of like, it's tough, but I think it's Kaido favored. But then you go into the green matchup and it's like very Kid favored, in my opinion at least. So once that happens, it's very difficult to decide. Like you were saying, it can win an event specifically based off matchups, on draw. Like, there's a lot of factors that go into card games, but I wouldn't be surprised if I saw Kaido win an event. Super strong cards that they gave him, and his effect is fantastic. Like, let's not lie here. And the structure deck, the queen, the king, the 1-drop event, like on the stage, like they just got everything, you know. Very, very good structure deck. If you're looking for cheap pickup deck that you can, one box, you can trade it for a little bit. You can have Kaido as like on day one for like
Yeah,
$50, man. It's crazy.
Kaido is definitely going to be the easiest deck to build coming out of the set. If you have already from the deck limited battles, he's the easiest to transition into
Yeah,
a full One Piece set one deck.
yeah. I feel like, Kaido and Kid probably one of the easier ones, depending on how much people start to value
Kid's
the A
rough.
drop. I was looking at values actually. I did a market watch video prior to this. Funnily enough, it's not as bad as you may think, but it
Uh,
depends on how people decide to like
he
trade and
needs
things
he
for it.
needs multiple SRs though.
Oh, I guess. But no,
Yeah,
definitely this
Kid.
one is much easier to acquire in my opinion, and
Yeah.
it's just almost all straight out of the box. S tier.
Yep.
And with our last leader here, we have King. King got his own leader card. And for those of you who don't know, because even I didn't know, on your turn, if you have 10 Dawn cards on your field, all your opponent's characters have minus 1,000 power. So if you have 10 Dawn on your field, sorry, comma, your opponent's characters have minus 1,000 power. I feel like that's a really, really strong effect. Just a blanket your turn minus 1,000 to your opponent's board. But is it good enough to be better than Baroque work, be better than this dual color, be better than even Purple Kaido itself? I'm not sure.
No, I don't think this effect is really all that great. I think it's like a decent like extra piece of like removal, but I mean, it would have to be. It just doesn't do
It
enough.
just doesn't do enough, I know.
But besides the fact that the leader or the purple's cards are designed basically for Kaido, but basically designed to remove Dawn,
Hmm.
it just makes it tough to stay at 10 Dawn in
Correct.
consecutive
I
turns.
mean, this character is an Animal Kingdom pirate. I mean, this leader is an Animal Kingdom pirate, so therefore you can play the stage with it, and you can still play all the very powerful Animal Kingdom cards. Just unfortunately, it doesn't really do what Kaido wants to do. It kind of wants to do something a little weirder, and it doesn't really have like much more oomph
He's
than what the
more.
other pieces have.
He's gonna be stronger later on when you can play a purple deck that doesn't have to sacrifice half of its Dawn to do
The
anything.
do
Right?
effects, correct,
Yeah,
correct. Now this
yeah,
leader
because
definitely,
he's okay sacrificing 2, 3, like anything more than 3 is a problem for him, right?
mhm.
Because you can't like Onigashima plus next turn have the 2 Dawn, right? And then you're at 10 again, right?
Yeah, you
So you want
definitely
to
don't
be
want
at
to
10.
drop like 10 drop Kaido, 9 drop Kaido. Like these very
It
powerful
feels
swing cards,
terrible.
they feel super bad in this deck, like bonus bad. So,
Yeah.
because the fact that this deck just wants you to stay at 10, it kind of rewards you for keeping that 10 value. You might want to like, you can drop 2 as you were saying to go to 8, because on the next turn you'll go back to 10 anyways, because there's a Euro turn effect no matter what. So,
Yep.
as you were saying, anything more than 3 just feels like a little too much, unless you have like the stage to like back it up. But yeah, I think this leader will definitely become more and more powerful in the future. And if you guys haven't seen the alt art for this card, give it a peek. It's a super cool card, but unfortunately, in terms of viability, yoink.
I put him. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Nice where he belongs in the D
right where
tier.
he belongs, next to Monkey D. Luffy, brother. But I think this is a pretty comprehensive tier list. Unfortunately, look at this: the crocodiles standing side by side in B tier. Again, much of this is based on the idea that we're trying to create a tier list, but many of the colors kind of like have very divided leaders. Like this Odin versus this Kid, it's almost a no-brainer. Then you have this Kaido versus this King, this Flamingo versus this Crocodile. Like, why would you play one when you can play the other? And that's where, creating a tier list is difficult. And that's why these are the ones that really, really stand out. These are the ones you want to keep your eyes on. Keep your eyes on the
Yeah.
prize. These top 6 leaders are very much, I wouldn't be surprised if I see them legitimately everywhere. And funnily enough, it's 3 structures versus 3 OP1. So you got a nice little diversity there. So I'm excited to see how this shapes up in our format. And thank you, Andrew, for joining us and giving us your hot takes, as you say, in the One Piece card game. God bless, guys.